DW Africa Link.
Leaders from across Africa and Japan are gathered for the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TICAD-9, or also known as the Japan-Africa Summit. At first, it seems to be just one of many nation-to-continent business conferences aimed at Africa's economic development. There's also the Russia-Africa Summit, the US-Africa Business Summit, the German-African Business Summit, the France-Africa Summit, and the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. And that's not even the complete list. This year, though, the stakes are high. The United States has cut aid and is moving towards a tariff-based global trade system. This shift in policy has significant implications, particularly for African countries, which have traditionally relied on aid from the United States for their economic development. The Japan-Africa Summit, though, could be a clear indication of the changing dynamics in how rich countries engage African counterparts. Japan seems to have transitioned from traditional aid-based cooperation to strategic trade-first partnerships. So this does raise the question, is this a genuine commitment to trade with African nations, or is it merely a diplomatic gesture? That's what's coming up. I'm Kai Nebe. Welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter from across Africa.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The Japan-Africa Summit, or TICAD-9, holds the promise of innovation, investment, and mutual respect. Japanese leader Shigeru Ishiba's announcement of Japan's plan to grant loans of up to $5.5 billion in coordination with the African Development Bank is a testament to this, and does to a certain degree instill hope for Africa's future. Now, 49 African nations attended the summit, and many deals were struck. But for today, we'll be speaking primarily about how Ghana represented itself and what it was able to get out of the conference, because their strategy provides a particular insight into how African nations are trying to sell their potential abroad and how desperately countries like Japan need it. I'm now joined from Accra by DW correspondent Isaac Kaleji and international relations analyst Michael Nketsia. I got the conversation rolling by asking Michael Nketsia how such a significant conference almost went under the radar.
There was even a meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin of Russia. And if you are talking about a meeting between perhaps or debatably two of the world's most powerful people on earth, it definitely was going to dwarf the Japan-Africa 2025 summit. And then, of course, we know about the war in Ukraine. We have other issues as well that took global center stage. So it is not surprising that the Tokyo International Conference on Africa Development couldn't have gained much traction as expected.
And but on that, I just want to go quickly to Isaac Kaleji, our correspondent in Ghana. It may not have got that. I mean, you're right, it was overshadowed, but still, like, there were actually some important meetings that happened specifically for some of the African leaders, and in particular, President John Mahama from Ghana met the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. And Isaac, just from a Ghanaian perspective, what kind of key outcomes came from that meeting, Isaac?
Indeed, it was a strategic meeting that the president attended from the perspective of government, because there were several deals that were signed. For example, the foreign affairs minister had indicated that city ringway projects commencing quickly very soon because of deals signed there. They are trying to develop signed deals related to Toyota expanding operations in Ghana, science space being developed in Ghana by the Japanese. There were issues about AI, support for the agriculture sector. So it appears there was a lot of deals that got signed because the president attended this summit. So in that context, I think for the government of Ghana, they think this was a successful event that the president was part of.
Yeah, and Michael, when you, as an analyst looking at this for Ghana in particular, what does Ghana have that can really that is interesting for Japan? Like, why would that strategic meeting between Mahama and Ishaba be quite important also for a Ghanaian growth perspective?
Even before the commencement of the conference, there were a lot of opportunities for mutual benefit between Africa and Japan, and Ghana in particular stands at a very unique position to benefit. The government of President John Dramani Mahama, since his swearing in, this seeks to create an enabling environment of 24 hours energy provision and productivity. The government is providing the needed infrastructure and energy provision for companies, including both public and private enterprises, to run full-time 24/7, and there are a lot of avenues or opportunities for Japanese companies to tap into. Now, at the onset of the conference, the government of Ghana announced $100 million investment by Japanese tech firm called Degas. This seeks to initiate an artificial intelligence-driven agriculture with cutting-edge AI tools to modernize farming, strengthen value chains, and create youth employment opportunities for the youth. Ghana has vast and arable land resources for any Japanese firm that want to partner in agriculture to come on board. Beyond that, Japan imports a lot of cocoa from Ghana for its confectionery industry, and Ghana offers that huge and unique market for Japanese tech firms. Now, when you come to the automobile industry, Ghana imports more cars from Japan probably than the United States of America or even Canada. And majority of our spare parts in Ghana are imported from Japan and Korea. In the previous administration, they brought what we call the One District, One Factory initiative, where a company seeking to set up industrial facilities or plants in Ghana are provided with the land of President Dramani Mahama seeks to improve upon these initiatives that were done by the previous administration by implementing the 24-hour policy. And President Mahama, he made a serious commitment to the Japanese people and the Japanese companies that his government will fast-track approval of trade deals. The government of Ghana is ready to provide what we call sovereign guarantee so that companies can partner the government in addressing its developmental needs. Once you are bringing your investments to Ghana, you shouldn't be afraid of how the people or government of Ghana is going to pay back such investments.
That's a very interesting point that you're raising, because it seems that that Japan is now looking towards African countries, and in this particular case Ghana, as more of a strategic trade partner rather than a country that can be a recipient of donor aid, for instance. And I mean, we've seen that across Africa, from South Africa to Egypt almost, where Japan has been known as one of the biggest donors. Do you actually see it that way? Do you really think that this is a sign that Japan sees African countries, and Ghana in particular, as a strategic trade partner?
I think it is even in the interest of Ghana and other African countries to transition from always begging for donor support, donor assistance, to becoming development partners. One may ask, for how long can the rest of the world continue to take care of Africa? It's been decades of grants, of aid, of loans, and all of you that haven't led much to development on the continent. If we are really serious and genuine about our strategic developmental needs, I think it is time for us to transition from being beggars of development assistance or aid to development partners. Once we transition to that level, it gives us Africans and African countries in general much more of a leverage when it comes to negotiations on international. Developing or underdeveloped world are often battered with trade policies, with international agreements and conventions that do not benefit of even companies and entrepreneurs on the continent. However, if you work or if you transition to the level of development partners, it gives you an equal right and opportunity to make arguments for a fair share of any form of international agreement, deal, or transaction. No country on earth developed simply because it was supported by donor countries or other international organizations. The time has come for Africa to get the basics right, transition to development partners, come out with creative and genuine ideas to attract investments into your economy. And mind you, it is not Africa that needs the rest of the world the most. No, the rest of the world also needs Africa. Japan, Europe, America, they need China in particular. They need Africa's vast natural resources in the automobile industry, in the emerging electronic vehicle industries, all the rare earth natural minerals that are used for electronic vehicles. Majority of them are on the African continent. We have the raw materials, but we have
now. Isaac, Ghana's Minister of the Economy, Dr. Ofuso Adjare, also spoke about industrial formation. I gather has been a challenge within Ghana, but we also are seeing the same problem that is happening in countries like Nigeria and other nations that are trying to industrialize quickly. Looked at it from that angle, I mean, what innovations is Ghana actually prioritizing to build an economy that sort of can withstand the
So she's really in a sector that is quite important for the government. I mean, before the Mahama administration won for our economy, which obviously ought to be an economy that is based on production, right? So there's a need to expand industries and able to give opportunity to young people. And in the context of the kind of innovation that the government is looking out for is in the areas, for example, of technology, right? AI, and being able to give young people and the technological tools to be able to expand and actually put is an important aspect for the government. Green transition, I mean, when it comes to energy, it's an important aspect. Modernizing agriculture, an important aspect. And that's why you see that the deals that the government signed with the Japanese government as well had so much focus in that area in terms of agriculture.
Michael, just to come back to you, we've talked about innovation. We've also talked about Japan investing in Ghana, that it's a growing market for things like vehicles and that type of thing. But one thing I would just like to go back to, why is Japan quite interested in exploiting Ghana's agro-business? I mean, Ghana has for a long time been known for its cocoa exports, but the price of cocoa, of course, fluctuates, and that's known historically to be not necessarily a very stable business. So in terms of exports, what is it that is particularly interesting for Japan with regard to Ghana, or for Ghana to export to Japan?
Beyond cocoa, there are a lot of diverse business opportunities and export opportunities for Japan. Japan's economy is basically a manufacturing economy. Almost every part of the Japanese economy relies on manufacturing, from automobile industry to the pharmaceuticals, machineries. And if you look at the top 10 exports of Japan from Africa, it depends basically on natural resources, and Ghana in particular. With the emerging electronic vehicle or EV industry, almost all the rare earth minerals that Japanese firms like Toyota, like Nissan, like Honda, and any other major automobile industry in Japan may rely on for this new technology. Ghana has it. About 4 years ago, the government of Ghana announced the discovery of commercial quantities of lithium, which is the basic component for the manufacturing of electronic vehicle batteries. And all these are in abundance in Ghana. Beyond cocoa, Ghana has other vast resources that we export. Japan is a major steel manufacturing country on earth because of its huge and large automobile industry. The basic component for all these is aluminium. Ghana has the largest deposits of bauxite ores. We have in excess over $3 trillion worth of bauxite ore deposits in Ghana. And all these are things that the Japanese government and the Japanese automobile industry can easily export to Japan. Beyond that, even along our agriculture value chain, beyond cocoa. When it comes to coffee, yes, we may not grow coffee compared to other Eastern African countries or even our neighbors in Ivory Coast, but we also have large commercial quantities of coffee in Ghana, cashew nuts. We were the largest exporter of gold on the African continent. Ghana serves as a strategic location, and beyond all that, Ghana provides a safe, peaceful, and checking in vast resources in terms of natural resources, but lackable, conducive, and secured environment for multinational corporations to operate.
So it's good that you are bringing these things up. But the one thing I would just like to ask, from your perspective, we've seen lots of trade deals, and we've also seen sort of a shift in how, especially since the Trump administration has come into power, that we are looking at sort of, there's been sort of a shift towards not so much mutual development, but more like transactional trade. And I would think that a country like Japan, which has quite a lot more economic power than, say, Ghana or other countries, do you worry perhaps that some of these trade deals that Ghana is signing or other African countries are signed at this event may be, exploitative? Obviously, Japan is not doing all this because they particularly want to help, but they have to do it, as you mentioned earlier. Do you think that there might be a problem there?
The problem is not with a trade happening or these agreements coming. The issue is about from it. If you are a sovereign country and you fail to put in the right investments and opportunities, infrastructure, and even human resources to be able to negotiate properly at the international level, that comes at your own loss. Yes, Japan may come with all these opportunities. The government of Japan announced that it is seeking to invest $30 billion worth of investments in Africa in the next 3-4 years, about an average of $10 million every year. Yes, all these investment opportunities are being offered to African countries, Ghana included. But how is the government of Ghana going to benefit from it? How do we make sure that we, Africa or Ghana, is not ripped off? It depends on our own preparedness and readiness. People go to trade negotiations with experts. It is the responsibility of the government of Ghana and the government of any other African country to go to these summits with the experts, with the trade experts, people who know how to structure trade arrangements and agreements so that it inures to the benefit of your country. That is what every responsible government should do. And I don't expect the Japanese people to teach us this. It is something fundamental. Is something basic, and it is something that I believe the government.
A lot about the new strategic partnership. We've talked about the kind of exciting opportunities there are, but at the end of the day, someone has to run this, and someone who is also able to deal with the technological changes of the age. Especially, as you mentioned earlier, with regarding AI becoming a bigger and bigger factor. So one of the themes at this summit was actually innovation and youth empowerment, a situation that, for example, in Japan, that is a genuine problem. There are just not that many young people in that country anymore. Whereas in Ghana, you have a kind of almost the opposite problem where you have youth unemployment. So how does a partnership like this actually help in a situation like this?
Well, when Japanese companies are lured to set up assembling plants or manufacturing companies in Ghana, it definitely is going to lead to youth address issues of youth unemployment, because once there are jobs, the youth have access to job opportunities. Now, we talked earlier about a $100 million investment by Degas Limited into Ghana's agriculture sector with AI-driven technologies. All these comes with a lot of opportunities for the youth. And then what I want the government of Ghana to focus on, there are countries on earth, India in particular, that exports labor to the rest of the world. As of 2019, Cuba was making more than $10 billion from the export of medical doctors and other health professionals to the rest of the world. What is Ghana doing? We have a lot of nurses who graduated about a year or two ago who are unemployed. They haven't been recruited by the government yet. Now, with the emergence of the electronic vehicle industries and Ghana being fortunate to have some of the rare earth minerals that are so critical to these modern technological innovations, we can lure Japanese companies to come and set up mining companies that harvest or mine these resources. And these are huge, huge, huge avenues for youth unemployment to be addressed. And it shouldn't only be about the mining of the raw materials and exports. We have to demand in the trade arrangements and agreements that a percentage of these raw materials should be processed in Ghana. That is what we call value addition to raw materials before they are exported. That is where the real job chain lies.
On that, thanks. We can lead up straight to Isaac. Isaac, do you know, from what has happened since that the Japan-Africa summit closed, have there been noises from the Ghanaian government touting the particular opportunities for young Ghanaians, and especially perhaps even ways in which young Japanese and young Ghanaians can work together to solve some of these pressing issues?
Yes, so basically the Foreign Affairs Minister has come out to tout some of these achievements. He thinks that it's a great accomplishment for the government, and especially the issues related to the training of like 300,000 youth in AI and modern agriculture has been something he has spoken widely about. Also, he has stressed much on the issue related to the investment in the agri sector. That's $100 million in the agri sector. So they've begun to talk about them, but I'm sure that until the details as to in terms of how this rollout will take place. But again, we've also known that this government has said that it wants to make diplomacy more beneficial to the people, right? So for example, Michael talked about the exportation of labor. It is something the government has already spoken about, to find a way to make sure that we don't just have relationship with other countries, whether from the West or Asia, but to make sure that it's beneficial. So whichever place that we have diplomats are, we need to make sure that we bring in something back home. And if it means that getting people out there to work, and then we can rake in something out of that, that benefits the people. It's not just in words, but in action. And they think that this is the first step towards achieving that in this administration.
All right. Now, finally, Michael, before we let you go, we've talked a lot about how Ghana has approached the summit and the things that they actually wanted to get out of, and it seems that there are bright signs for it. Let's just talk about the African continent for 1 second here, because if, for example, this works, do you see that this could become a blueprint for how Japan would work across other African countries, or the approach they would take?
Well, I believe the new approach is a wonderful strategy, but we should also be reminded that this is not the first time that such development cooperations, assistance, and arrangements and agreements are being fostered on Africa. We have a long history from the African Growth Opportunity Act, so many of them. And just this last year, there was the China-Africa Summit as well, where the Chinese government leaders on a similar development cooperations and paths. Yes, the blueprint is good, but there's a big or huge gap between policy formulation and policy implementation. We need to limit that gap. Good ideas on paper, but how effective and how fast and how are we going to implement it? Do we have a peaceful environment, conducive environment? Are resources going to be provided? In most instances, governments in the other side of the world promise billions of dollars, but in reality, very little comes down for the actual implementation of all these wonderful and fanciful ideas. African governments must push the Japanese people for the $30 billion worth of investment to be invested in on the continent. And then we also have to make some provisions for investment, insurance, and guarantee. If someone is bringing $30 billion worth of money or investment into your economy, you must, in the Sahel in particular, are we addressing the issues of terrorism, violent extremism, kidnapping in Nigeria, piracy, name them, a lot of them that could become a disincentive for these investments to actually be implemented or brought down to the African continent. So it works in two way around. Japan has a role to play. Ghana and the rest of the African continent has a role to play. And I believe that if each of the parties to the agreement is able to play his or her role very well, then we can have something feasible on the grounds to point to and to be proud of a year by this time.
I was joined by international relations analyst Michael Nketsia and DW's Isaac Kelechi in Accra. That's where we will have to leave things for today's podcast. You can find many more Africa Link episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have a burning topic you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments. From producer Isaac Mugabi and me, Kai Nebe, it's bye for now.
DW, made for minds.